Does your teenager constantly avoid trying new things? Do they avoid taking risks? Or maybe they feel frustrated when they fail or when they don't get things the way they want it? Now, that is probably a natural response to the situations that they face. However, it is also possible that your teenager is struggling with perfectionism. So let's talk about perfectionism. Let's talk about fear of failure. Because I saw a stat that says up to 78% of teenagers struggle with the fear of failure. Some other statistics say when girls are in their age of puberty, it is about 50% of them who avoid trying out new things because they think they're not going to perform excellently as those experiences. So by the end of this video, we're going to explore the issues surrounding perfectionism and fear of failure, and we are going to look at how it affects your teenager. But more importantly, we are always going to talk about how to help your child overcome this particular issue. So what are the problems with fear of failure, with perfectionism? The first problem is risk aversion. Okay, when your teenagers avoid challenges, avoid taking on creative exercises because they are afraid of failure. Teenagers are terrified of failing, so they rather not try a particular thing rather than try it and look bad at it. So like I said, it could be natural. However, this can be a creativity killer. It can destroy self-expression. It can destroy their personality. Because if they are too afraid to start, then they're never going to practice. They're never going to improve. They're never going to discover their strengths and their true personality. For example, maybe your teenager loves drawing. Maybe they like to play music on the instrument or even to sing, but suddenly they stop because they've been criticized at some point. Somebody has a quote and unquote yapped them. All right. It could be that they are scared of not being good enough. But how do you respond? You need to encourage effort rather than outcomes. That is a very important thing in dealing with young people, is encouraging their effort rather than only the outcomes. Because if only outcomes and performances are rewarded, then teenagers tend to forget to pay attention to the process that leads to that outcome. So pay attention to praising their attempt, pay attention to praising their effort at doing something and not just their successes. Of course, successes are going to be praised, but pay attention to encouraging their effort. It's also important for you to share your own failures, share your own processes, share your journey, and let them see failure as a part of learning, not just as an event and something to always avoid. The second problem with perfectionism is it leads to self-censorship. And this is the reason why I talk to parents a lot and I ask that as much as possible, for as long as possible, you need to keep your young person and your teenager away from social media. The effect of social media is on its own an entirely big thing, because teenagers are constantly comparing themselves to perfect curated online content. Okay, so they're going to feel pressured to want to meet up to this impossible standard, because whatever you see on social media is edited. Like I said, it's curated, it is post produced. So what you're seeing is a finished product that has taken a lot of process, a lot of failure and trying again before you come up with the one that we have decided to post for everybody to see, including this video that you're watching. All right, it's gone through some editing process, it's gone through some things before it comes out for you to see it. But if you keep your teenager away from comparing their process with that kind of result and outcome, then you allow them a space to fail on their own. They also need to learn to deal with the fear of judgment, the fear of embarrassment, the fear of criticism. Okay, so that that whole fear is what allows them to hold back instead of expressing themselves instead of learning to experience and enjoy the process. The whole result of what I've just said is that instead of your teenager trying out something, they end up consuming the lives of other people. And instead of exploring, instead of creating, they become digital consumers and never ever trying out to express their creative side. And what can you do? I've talked about, first of all, trying to keep them away from that environment, but also foster a safe to feel environment in your home. So at home is a place where we are allowed to fail, where we're allowed to make mistakes, where we're allowed to laugh, and where we are allowed to learn. Encourage them to create offline, away from judgment. And this is the point where I'm going to mention the 30-day creativity challenge that we are hosting in the month of April, from 1st to the 30th of April. We want to put teenagers in a space where they are allowed to try things out with no particular performance metric in place. They are allowed to try out, they're allowed to fail, they're allowed to create, they're allowed to share and encourage one another. So teach your teenager that social media is a highlight reel, it's not real life. Okay, it's important for them to get that part of the conversation. The third part of, or the third problem when it comes to perfectionism and fear of failure is that it creates creativity paralysis for young people. It makes young people overthinkers and procrastinators. Have you ever heard some person say that they are overthinkers? I'm not sure what that label means, but I don't think it's a very good label for anybody to go by. So, perfectionism has a cycle. It begins with, first of all, you set unrealistic standards for yourself. You set practically impossible standards for yourself. Then you start getting anxious. You are anxious about meeting the very standards that you have set. And so it leads to procrastination because you are afraid. So you start procrastinating and then you never finish. And the fact that you procrastinate and never finish will in itself reinforce the fear that created it in the first place. So it's a vicious cycle. Perfectionism is a vicious cycle and there is never any end in sight. For example, if your teenager keeps saying, I'll do it later, I'm not ready yet, I can't do it now, some other time, they are probably struggling with perfectionism and it's going to hinder their progress, it's going to create a lot of delays in their life. And what you can do is to help them set small, manageable, actionable goals. So I teach the SMART goal system and I emphasize on the fact that goals have to be actionable, they have to be small and achievable in themselves. Help them to break down projects into small steps. You know, we're going back to focusing on the process now. Break down the big project into small, manageable processes so that they don't feel overwhelmed with achieving that. Then, of course, very importantly, you need to start encouraging and celebrating process more than just the goal or the result. We need to start celebrating the processes rather than the presence, rather than the perfection, rather than the outcome. If your teenager learns to be praised for putting the effort, for making the effort required, eventually it is the effort that leads to the result. But when we only praise teenagers for their outcomes, we only praise them for their results, we only give awards for what they have done, then if they fail to realize that process is as important as the result. So celebrate their progress, celebrate their participation in the process, and also, of course, celebrate their results, but give equal attention to all the parts. So generally speaking, what is the solution to overcoming fear of failure, to overcoming perfectionism? You need to encourage your teenagers to embrace a mindset of a messy first start. So the first start is always going to be messy. All right. Let them know that creativity is not about perfection. Creativity is about progress. And so there's always room for updating things. The phone that you're using, the apps on your phone, and so many things today will constantly send you notifications for new updates and new releases. So if technology is subject to updates and improvements, how much more our own personal lives and creativity? So create that impression strongly in the mind of a teenager that the first start can always be messy. The first draft is always going to be wrong. In case you're trying to write a piece of music or a painting or something, there is always room for improvement. Do the first draft and be willing to revisit it, improve it, accept criticism for where you're wrong, and then do better next time. Secondly, you need to help your teenager reframe failure as a learning process and not just as an event. Also, in teaching success, I like to teach young people that success is a process, it's not just an event. Okay, every mistake, every setback is a stepping stone for something bigger. It's a stepping stone for growth. It's a stepping stone for improvement, and that is very important for your teenager to learn. Reduce the pressure to perform. Reduce the pressure to perform. Help your teenager find joy in the process and not just the result. And this is where things like your spiritual devotion becomes necessary, because have you seen people who come to church only because they want to come and perform rather than worship? But if your child has learned to practice devotion just for the audience of one, then you learn to reduce that pressure for performance. Whatever you now do on the big stage is an overflow of what you have practiced and mastered on your private stage. Finally, as a parent, you need to be a role model for your child. Let them see you try new things. Let them see you fail. Let them see you pick up yourself and try again. So that's it for this conversation on perfectionism and fear of failure. If your teenager is struggling with perfectionism and fear of failure, they will constantly need your support. So comment below. Tell me what your experience has been. What is one way that you have helped your teenager to overcome fear of failure? Let's talk about it in the comment section. Feel free to like and share this video with someone who's going to find it helpful. But most importantly, sign up for the 30 days creativity challenge happening from the 1st to the 30th of April. I'll see you inside.